This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening and thank you for being with us tonight. Almost 600 people are waiting to get back into their homes in the Cranberry Portage area. Wildfires are still burning and crews from New Brunswick and Quebec are now coming to Manitoba to help. For many, the devastation goes beyond being uprooted. And as CBC's Brittany Greenslade shows us, the cost of leaving their homes is a big concern.
It's been 4 days since hundreds of people from the town of Cranberry Portage were forced to flee their homes as wildfire grew, threatening the community. People were rushed out in minutes.
Frustration, the devastation that we're all going through, being so quickly and unorganized. Everything was not prepared.
Many, like Joanne Head, say they feel they've been left to fend for themselves.
Hi, how are you?
She confronted Premier Wab Canoe when he visited evacuees in the PA.
When there's devastation like this, somebody has to kick in and help.
Yeah, that's right.
And nobody did right away.
Head says for people like her with disabilities, the evacuation has been especially hard. The fire destroyed hydro lines and knocked out power as far north as Flin Flon. There was no cell or internet service. Many people couldn't access their money.
Everything is shut down. Our banks, we have no access to our own individual money in our bank accounts. I have maybe $20, $30 at the most in my checking account, and I couldn't even get to that to put gas into our vehicle.
Once people were able to get to safety in Flin Flon or the PA, they were told they were required to foot the bill for the first 3 days at a hotel, if they were able to find a place.
Pay up front for rooms. How can you pay up front? We don't even have money.
George Brightnose says people can't afford it. He's on a fixed income and can't put cash aside just in case.
That was a big issue for me personally because, you know what, I'm a pension person, you know, and you get pension once a month. What do? You got to spend some of that money in between time. I never save for emergencies.
And evacuees are concerned this is just the first of what could be many ahead.
We're going through a drought state again, and it's going to happen all over. Like, this is just the start. Who's to say how many more will come?
If they could transport him there, he's the glue to our family.
Those frustrations reflected in an impromptu meeting from evacuees, angry and upset, echoing the same concerns.
We're anticipating it's going to incur a lot of financial hardship.
The Premier says he doesn't want anyone to fall through the cracks and says the province will be there to support people with food and shelter. Brittany Greenslade, CBC News, The PA.
A Winnipeg court heard from people who knew admitted serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky today, neighbors who lived in the same apartment building, and a man that worked in a Winnipeg shelter that he frequented. Now, you might notice that we are pronouncing Skibitsky's name differently. CBC News has learned through court proceedings that Skibitsky is, in fact, the correct pronunciation of his name and the version that we will be using going forward. CBC's Alana Cole was at the trial today and has the details.
Before his arrest in May of 2022, admitted serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky was at a Winnipeg shelter on Disraeli almost daily. That's what a man who works there told court this afternoon. The man, Ronald Norman, said he remembered a conversation he had with Skibitsky. He said Skibitsky told him, quote, that he didn't need to be there, that he had his own place, and that he was just there to stalk his victims. He says he reported that information to police soon after he saw Skibitsky in the news. Also testifying in court today, 3 men who lived in the same apartment building as Skibitsky. A man who lived next door said on the weekend, before remains belonging to Rebecca Contois were found, he heard Skibitsky's shower running a number of times over the span of several hours. Another said he was woken up by Skibitsky coming and going from the building around 2 a.m. and confronted him, asking him what he was doing. Skibitsky said, throwing away garbage. That was hours before Contois' partial remains were found on the morning of May 16th. Another resident says he saw Skibitsky throwing away an armful of clothing. Skibitsky has admitted to killing Contois, Mercedes Myron, Morgan Harris, and an unknown woman given the name Mashkade Bishake Ikwe Iban. His lawyers plan to argue he is not criminally responsible. Alana Cole, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Dozens of dogs have been rescued from what the head of Winnipeg's Animal Services branch calls horrific conditions. Leland Gordon says police were called to a home around 1 this morning. Inside that home, they found 68 small breed dogs in inhumane conditions and called Animal Services. Gordon says this is the largest seizure of dogs ever.
There is a horrific stench of urine, feces, lots of puppies in there. And so all our officers did don Tyvek suits, kind of hazmat type suits, and went into the home, and they methodically rescued those dogs from these conditions.
Gordon says Animal Services is now overwhelmed caring for those dogs, many of which have health issues. The Winnipeg Humane Society is arranging medical care and boarding for the animals while police investigate. Winnipeg police are looking for multiple people in an attack at the food fair on Portage Avenue. Police say 3 grocery store staff were attacked with brass knuckles and rushed to hospital last night. A 17-year-old has been charged, but Constable Claude Chansey says investigators believe there are more suspects.
In further investigation, we know that there's other people involved, and we're able to now relay that information, and hopefully we'll get some tips from the public. And of course, all those tips are looked at and followed up.
The Portage Food Fair has been under scrutiny for how it handles suspected shoplifters. Police won't say if this assault is connected to previous ones. Now to the legislature now, where Manitoba's opposition is raising concerns about the province's new environmental advisor. The Progressive Conservatives say the NDP government shouldn't be listening to his advice. For more, we are joined by the CBC's Ian Fraze live in the newsroom tonight. Ian, what are the PCs saying about Ken Clausen's advice?
Well, they say Manitobans cannot afford him. Clausen's worked in the environmental field for more than 30 years. In 2018, he told a legislative committee both the carbon tax and the provincial gas tax aren't high enough. He also said new homes shouldn't be powered with natural gas. The NDP government has taken none of these positions, but PC finance critic Abhi Khan is still sounding the alarm.
These are things he's willing to say on the record. What is he willing to say off the record to the minister behind closed doors? Governments don't hire advisors to ignore them. They hire advisors to take their advice.
Adrian Sala is the minister responsible for Manitoba Hydro. He says he'll consider Clausen's advice, but not at the expense of the government's policies. Right now, there's a gas tax holiday, and the province wants the federal carbon tax removed.
Meanwhile, Ian, the government says more paramedics are coming to rural Manitoba. What do we know about that?
Red River College Polytechnic will soon offer 16 new training seats for advanced care paramedics. That's the highest license there is for paramedics in Manitoba. These seats were promised by the PCs before the last election. Now it's about to happen. The current NDP health minister says those students will have jobs waiting for them when they graduate.
Advanced care paramedicine is fundamentally important to not only care in urban settings, but certainly in rural and northern Manitoba. So we're funding these seats so that folks have the opportunity to get trained, and then we're also funding jobs in rural Manitoba so that they can practice to their full ability.
In 2020, the advanced care training program was suspended for a year because there were no jobs for them. Riley.
Thank you, Ian. That's the CBC's Ian Fraze in our newsroom. Well, speaking of paramedics, next week is Paramedic Services Week in our province. And in order for the public to better understand their jobs, the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service let our cameras get an up-close look today at the kinds of work they do when they answer a call for help. Have a look.
Stab it in there, administer the medication, And if you press all the way down, the needle self-retracts as a safety mechanism, and you've administered Narcan. I've been a paramedic for 20 years, and when I first started out, maybe I would experience 1 or 2 opiate overdoses a year. Now we're seeing dozens of these types of events each day.
I got no pulse, no breathing. This is a confirmed unknown.
Today what we have for you is our crews are going to be doing a mock scenario of a 911 call. The idea behind this scenario is that we receive a call for service for a person with chest pain. They go unresponsive. Patient's found in cardiac arrest. They defibrillate the patient, get a pulse back on them. Patient begins to speak. On further assessment, they determine the patients have what's called a STEMI, which is ST elevation myocardial infarction. And then they start the procedure to provide medication and speak to cardiology to transport them there.
Drug use and sometimes use of opioids it goes beyond our downtown. It can happen in any of our neighborhoods throughout the city. And so that's the reality, is that our fire paramedic crews are responding to drug-related calls all through our city.
Indigenous leaders are gathered in Winnipeg to address ways to address what they call Indigenous identity fraud. The 2-day summit started yesterday in the city. The meeting was hosted by the Manitoba Métis Federation, the Chiefs of Ontario, and also includes Inuit and Innu leaders. Delegates passed a declaration that, among other things, that the federal and provincial governments cease their actions accommodating identity thieves and cooperate with legitimate nations.
And all of a sudden, we have the right to everything we have fought for, suffered for, died for, bled for, and the wars we went through to protect our identity and culture, that somebody could tomorrow morning just pop up and say, I'm a Métis, and I have the same right as a Red River Métis. That, to us, shows that this is a very serious issue.
The event sparked disappointment, though, from some groups who were either excluded from the meeting or on the receiving end of criticism. Heritage Winnipeg is raising concerns tonight about a proposal to build a 10-story apartment block next to a historic hotel in the Exchange District. The St. Charles Hotel and its owner Ken Zafman have submitted a plan to the city for an infill building to be built in the parking lot next to the vacant hotel. The hotel has been empty since 2008. Cindy Tugwell at Heritage Winnipeg is skeptical.
We've been told these stories year after year about the St. Charles Hotel. I really don't have a lot of faith that this is going to come into fruition. But moreover, I'm concerned still what's going to happen to the hotel. How is this going to fit into the larger plan?
Tugwell says it doesn't appear Zafman has secured funding for the project. He says he plans to apply to the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation for funds to make the units affordable. Tugwell is also concerned construction next door to a 110-year-old building could cause structural damage. Well, another dreary and damp day for most of us in southern Manitoba. Not as rainy, though. Didn't see many umbrellas in some of these shots here. Ethan Williams is tracking our forecast tonight.
Well, thanks, Riley. And some locations in southern Manitoba picking up quite a bit of rain over the past 24 hours from yesterday morning through to this morning, just northwest of Winnipeg in the Woodlands area, nearly 20 millimeters there. Portage just over 17. Winnipeg and Brandon, we managed to pick up kind of in the 10 to 15 millimeter range. These are kind of readings from 7 or 8 o'clock yesterday morning to 7 or 8 o'clock this morning, and just southeast of Winnipeg around 9 millimeters in the Steinbach area. Still seeing some showers moving through today. It took until the afternoon to see those kind of pop up in the Red River Valley, but those continue to move through southeastern Manitoba into these evening hours here, and still some cloud cover in behind that. For the rest of the province, still kind of seeing that bank of sunny skies stretching from the Hudson Bay coast through to the Parkland region, and a few thunderstorms starting to appear in northwestern sections of the province. Not great, of course, for firefighting efforts there. It's also where we're starting to see winds pick up a little bit, 40, gusting 50 at times. And you notice that those gusts primarily coming from the south, which is pushing that smoke northward. And that is why the Brochet area has been added to the air quality advisory. And so now we have advisories all along that western side of the province from the Paw northward, essentially. The smoke going to waft a bit southward as we head into tomorrow. So portions of the parkland, sections of western Manitoba could be getting a little bit of smoke at times before that moves into Saskatchewan, but otherwise staying mostly smoke-free in southern Manitoba. Temperature-wise, you can see where that sunshine was today because our highs got near 20 degrees from the parklands up toward the Gillam area. We actually did end up getting into the mid-teens for Winnipeg and southern Manitoba today, and near 20 degrees as well in places in northwestern Ontario. Now, in terms of the day planner tomorrow for Winnipeg, we'll be starting off the day on a bit of a cloudy note, and there is a chance that we could see some showers, albeit just a 40% chance, starting the day at 10 degrees, so we won't be dropping all that much overnight. That cloud cover helping to keep that a little bit of warmth in place. By the noon hour tomorrow, possibly some showers moving in once again, a temperature rising to around 14, but we may be seeing some breaks of sun here and there. And then I think a little more substantial clearing possibly as we get into the afternoon as we reach our daytime high of around 17 degrees at 4 o'clock. But be aware, there is a chance of some thunderstorms. Those should mostly be staying on the non-severe side of things. I'll have a look at your full provincial forecast, Riley, coming up.
All right, thanks, Ethan. Well, here is a little bit of a twist on a popular saying. Few things in life are certain, but taxes. So we might as well understand when big changes are looming. That is what's happening to education property taxes. The CBC's Ian Fraze breaks down how the rebates have worked in the past and what's going to be changing in the future.
The government wants to change how you pay for education property taxes in Manitoba. The biggest factors in determining whether you pay more or less, location, and the value of your home. Now, how do we get here anyways?
And we'll begin to phase out the education property tax as well. Phasing that out will benefit approximately 658,000 Manitoba ratepayers.
In 2019, the Tories promised to gradually eliminate the education tax portion of your property tax bill. So the PCs introduced a rebate, a refund for residential properties that's now at 50%. And they actually got halfway to scrapping the tax before losing last year's election. Now the NDP's in power. The PC rebates are sticking around, but only for this year. Instead of checks in the mail, any reductions are taken right off your tax bill. Next year, the NDP will offer a credit of up to $1,500 off your school tax bill. It'll help lower income households the most at the expense of those with higher incomes.
I invite anyone to look ahead to the $1,500 homeowner tax credit we're bringing in and compare it to the checks that the previous government mailed out.
So are you as a property owner better off? That depends on the value of your home and the school division tax rate where you live. So let's pull out that tax bill and look at the school taxes. That's what you'd be paying without any rebates or credits. If that amount is less than $2,300, you'll pay less in taxes. If that amount is more than $2,300, you'll pay more. The other part you need to factor in is the value of your home. Starting in 2025, the $1,500 credit the Premier was talking about is actually a credit, subtracted off your gross school taxes. So if the gross amount is $1,500 or less, you'll stop paying education taxes entirely. The province says that's almost 45% of homeowners. It applies to homes and condos assessed at $275,000 or less, depending on where you live. Now, if your gross school taxes are higher than $1,500 but less than $2,300, you'll still pay, but less than under the previous government's plan.
83.9% of Manitobans who own homes are going to do better off.
But some people will be worse off. Generally speaking, if your home is valued at $437,000 or above, you'll pay more. And if taxes and assessments keep rising, it means the government is underestimating how many people will pay more. The PCs say some middle-class homeowners will be impacted.
The government needs to take that into effect, that how can they make life more affordable for people that are not in that range, and how do they not penalize Manitobans for being in that range?
The NDP plan results in people with more money shouldering a greater share of the tax burden. They say it will add $148 million to the province's revenues. If you ask Premier Wald Canoe, he'd say this plan benefits the average Manitoba homeowner.
So if you're a fiscal conservative, I think this plan appeals to you because now we finally have a path towards balancing the budget in Manitoba. And if you're a progressive person, this should appeal to you because the most help is being delivered to those who need it most.
If you own more than one property, that $1,500 credit will only apply to your main residence. If you're a farmer with property, you'll keep getting the 50% rebate the Tories gave you. Those who will pay more under the NDP's plan for sure, people who own commercial or rental properties. No more rebates for you, at least for now. And what if you're a renter? With landlords no longer receiving a rebate under the new plan, your rent could rise, increasing the price you pay every month. So, when that new plan kicks in, it's not only the McMansions in Manitoba that will pay higher education taxes. Remember, for the most part, households like these, valued at $437,000 or above, will likely pay more under this plan. Because your home value and your neighborhood are the key considerations in how much you pay, many suburban sections of Manitoba could actually end up paying more under this plan.
Still ahead, an out-of-control wildfire forces thousands of residents in Fort McMurray from their homes. Others remain on alert to leave with a moment's notice. We'll get the latest after the break. This year's wildfire season is off to an early and aggressive start in Western Canada. There are more than 125 fires burning across the prairies, the Northwest Territories, and in British Columbia. Of course, we've been telling you about the fires that are burning in northern Manitoba. Meantime, evacuees from Fort Nelson, BC are hoping a change in the weather will help save their town. And in Alberta, Fort McMurray is once again under threat, with nearly 7,000 people there being told to leave their homes. CBC's Sam Sampson is in Fort McMurray with the latest.
This is Prairie Creek. It's one of the neighborhoods in Fort McMurray that was told to get out on Tuesday. Now, as you can see here, if you can prove that you actually live in the neighborhood, RCMP are letting people in on a case-by-case basis to grab essentials that maybe they missed when they were trying to evacuate as quickly as possible. We did meet one man earlier who came back to grab a generator, some work gear, things for his sons. They're all staying at a campground about an hour and a half away from here, and he told us what it was like to try to get out as fast as possible.
I have no time yesterday, like I back from site, so I just grab what my wife prepared for us, and then I just take my camper and we go to Wander River and stay in a camper for now.
We met another man who was trying to come in just to sleep for a little bit. He and another team are helping to create fire breaks around the city, so really paths where it would be difficult for the flames to get through. And he just described his exhaustion and what his shifts are like.
I got up here, pulled a 4-hour shift, then got a couple hours sleep, went on a 37-hour shift, then went home, 3 hours of sleep, and went on 12 hours last night, cutting fire guard.
About 6,600 people were ordered to leave their homes here in Fort McMurray, but we did see thousands of other people also leave just as a precaution. Whoever stayed is still on an evacuation alert, and the mayor described how he's seeing his community pull together.
We see community groups stepping up, our social profit groups stepping up to check on our vulnerable residents. We see local restaurants donating food and that sort of things to first responders.
As of Wednesday, there is a new fire ban in effect for a larger portion of northern Alberta to try to stave off any new fires. Now, cooler temperatures and pretty calm winds helped firefighting efforts in Fort McMurray on Wednesday, but officials say it's too early to know if more neighborhoods will be ordered to leave in the city. Officials also say and warn that evacuees from these neighborhoods should be prepared to be out of their homes until at least after the May long weekend. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Fort McMurray, Alberta.
A Saskatchewan man is now facing more than 70 charges for sexual crimes against dozens of children. While some relate to a daycare in his family home, the offenses are alleged to have occurred in several towns over the span of 20 years. CBC's Jason Warwick has the story.
Richard Dyke was charged and taken into custody back in November. RCMP say he assaulted and filmed 3 young children. But this week, police held a news conference to announce 60 new charges. There are now 32 alleged victims. According to court documents and local residents, Dyke's wife operated a daycare in the family home, but police say there's no indication she had any idea of what was allegedly occurring. Police say these offenses took place there and in towns across this region over nearly 20 years. Residents say they can't believe this was happening for so long in this small town. One mother says she's now hesitant to trust anyone with her kids. Another says she lived on the same block as Richard Dyke and says she hopes someone is helping all of those alleged victims.
I'm terrified. Like, as a mom of 2, I don't think I would send my kid to a day home ever after hearing this, especially with a man in the home as well. Like, I mean, I guess it could be a woman too, but I don't think I would be comfortable sending my kid to a day home after what happened in town here.
As RCMP noted, none of these allegations has been proven in court, but it's the volume and scope of the allegations that makes this case unique. 70 alleged offenses against 32 children over a 19-year period. And here's one final number, 1.5 million. That's the number of pieces of digital data analyzed by RCMP since his initial arrest back in November. As for Richard Dyke, he remains in custody. His next court appearance is in early June. Jason Warwick, CBC News, Assiniboia.
A new study suggests having more female physicians in operating rooms could result in improved patient outcomes. Canadian researchers wanted to explore what impact sex diversity in operating room teams. They looked at results of hundreds of thousands of elective surgeries over a 10-year period. CBC's Tashana Reid has more.
Published in the British Journal of Surgery, the study looked at a decade of administrative data at hospitals in Ontario for more than 700,000 patients who underwent major surgeries, including gastrointestinal, cardiac, and orthopedic. What they found was that hospitals with more than 35% female anesthetists and surgeons, there was a 3% reduction in major health complications, including death, within 3 months of surgery. The lead author of the study says the data suggests having more sex-balanced anesthesia and surgery teams leads to better outcomes for patients.
It's not only about equity and justice, it's really about increasing performance and providing better care, which is really what we should all strive towards. And I really hope that this is a good motivator for healthcare system and healthcare institutions to implement some changes to have well-balanced teams for the benefit of everybody.
While more women are entering medical schools, researchers say in the 10-year study period, the number of female anesthetists and surgeons only increased by 5%. And half of the hospitals included in the study had less than 35% women in those roles in 2019. This anesthesiologist says the research is important and raises even more questions.
When we're talking about diversity of teams and we're talking about how functional they are, what we also need to be thinking about is the power dynamics that are in that team and in that room. And so gender plays into that, race plays into that, the particular culture of that organization plays into that.
Researchers say more needs to be done not only around promotion and recruitment of women on surgical teams, but also retainment policies to ensure operating rooms are better balanced, which ultimately could lead to better health outcomes. Tashana Reid, CBC News, Toronto.
An intense and widespread manhunt is underway in France. More than 450 officers are looking for a notorious criminal known as the Fly, who was freed in a deadly ambush on a prison convoy yesterday. Gunmen rammed a stolen car into a prison van and opened fire as the criminal Mohamed Amra was being transported back to jail following a court appearance. 2 guards were killed and 3 others were seriously wounded. Amra is a known drug dealer with a lengthy criminal record and a history of violence. Police are also searching for the 30-year-old's accomplices. After the break, as we've been telling you throughout this week, wildfire season is off to a volatile start in Western Canada. We'll break down how climate change plays into it. And Ethan Williams has more on our Manitoba forecast and if we can expect a few more showers ahead. Stay with us. we're turning to our top story now, and the ongoing wildfires, not only in northern Manitoba, but of course, as we've shown you, right across Western Canada. It has been a very volatile start to the wildfire season in Western Canada. For more, I want to bring on Quinn Barber, a fire science analyst with Natural Resources Canada. I want to start by asking you today first, what do you make of the fire season that we've had so far?
Well, thank you for having me on. The fire season did start off with a bit of a bang this year. We've seen a lot of fires in British Columbia, Manitoba, across the prairie provinces. That's been largely as a result of these very low snowpacks from the last winter. In some cases, that was around half of normal. So we really started the season very dry. Not quite as bad as last year, though. To put it in context, we had almost 1 million hectares burned by this time last year. And we're sitting around 400,000 hectares at this time. So that's still quite a bit, though.
Yeah, you mentioned the snowpack, particularly in Western Canada. How much did the weather through the fall and the winter months play into what we're seeing now?
Oh, it's definitely a huge factor. It's been a very dry spring. It's been a very dry winter. We haven't had the scorching spring temperatures that we saw last year, but that lack of moisture has really been a problem. In BC, we're seeing what we call holdover fires, which are fires that smolder underground all winter. And you hope that those go out when the snowpack melts. But because of that lower snowpack, we haven't been able to put them all out. And so they actually flare up in the spring again. That's not necessarily what's happening in Manitoba, but Manitoba is in a state of drought. So we need a little more than a light drizzle to alleviate those conditions.
So bigger picture, I guess. What impact has climate change had on the wildfire seasons that we're starting to see, not only in Manitoba, but in other parts of the West?
Well, it's really tricky to directly attribute any sort of single event to climate change. You have to do what's called a formal attribution study. You compare this season to seasons a long time ago and see maybe it was 25% more likely, maybe it was 30% more likely. So it's a game of probability. But what is clear is that climate change is pushing us towards higher temperatures and lighter snowpacks. So that drought that we're seeing is definitely associated with a changing climate.
Yeah. So this explosive start to the last couple of fire seasons now, are we starting to get into unprecedented territory here?
I wouldn't say that. I'd say that this has been, at least been a fire-prone forest. Canada has a lot of forest. It's a fire-adapted ecosystem. So we're not seeing anything, except with the exception of last year, which was truly an enormous amount of fire. We're not seeing anything that we wouldn't expect to see out of the Canadian forest this year.
Knowing what we know about the fire seasons and how they're changing, how can we better prepare for what's ahead?
Well, what we know now is that these spring fires can come earlier and they can come faster than we've seen in the past. So we need to be aware of those areas where people are living in the forest, where houses are exposed to that fire, where infrastructure is exposed to that fire. You know, almost half of the wildfires in Canada are started by humans, whether that's a cigarette, whether that's an out-of-control campfire or an ATV. So you always need to keep an eye on those fire bans. And anytime that there is a fire, refer to the provincial or territorial agencies. They're really the best people to answer questions around safety and fire management.
All right. Quinn Barber with Natural Resources Canada, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So Quinn Barber says we need more than a light drizzle here to alleviate those concerns. A look at your Manitoba forecast now with Ethan Williams.
Well, Riley, showers yesterday, showers today, and that'll be the theme through the rest of the week here. And as we head toward the long weekend, this is the low pressure system bringing those showers through southern Manitoba. It'll be moving out overnight tonight, but I think still northwestern Ontario, we're in for some substantial rainfall. And then we kind of have another area of some showers along this cold front starting to move into the province. Areas near Flin Flon, near the fires, finally getting some rain and probably a few days here of some showery weather, which will help with the firefighting efforts there. We'll see some clearing tomorrow afternoon in the south of the province with a chance of some pop-up showers and thunderstorms. And then our next weather maker starts to move through. This warm front off a low pressure system bringing through some showers to southern Manitoba as we head through the early morning hours on Friday. And that kind of stalls out a bit and it moves into central parts of the province. And as we get into the later hours on Friday, that's when we're going to see that rain start to move in to kind of along the Manitoba-Saskatchewan border. And again, possibly helping the fire situation there. Overnight tonight, maybe another 10 to 15 millimeters in northwestern Ontario. Amounts here are going to be very dependent on pop-up showers and thunderstorms through the day tomorrow in southern Manitoba. So don't take these numbers, right to the bank. These are kind of taking into account maybe some showers that may not actually be happening as we head into Friday and Saturday, but still a good 5 to maybe 15 millimeters for sure in most sections of the province as we head through these next few days here. Keep in mind, wind's going to pick up a little bit here and there. Overnight tonight may gust to 30 in the Winnipeg area. Still quite breezy along the Hudson Bay coast, near 70 at times near Churchill. And then as we get through these next few days here, seeing those pick up likely again into the overnight hours as we get into Friday, gusting up to 40 through much of the province. So the overnight forecast tonight for Manitoba and northwestern Ontario showing that we're sitting near kind of that 5 to 10 degree range. Some cloudiness and possible showers even overnight once again. In the north, that's where we're going to be seeing some possible showers and maybe again a couple of thunderstorms along the Manitoba-Saskatchewan border. Otherwise, a mostly cloudy night. Those temperatures ranging from around 2 to 7 degrees. Some showers beginning to move in as we head through the day tomorrow. Temperatures into the mid-teens for much of northern Manitoba as we head through the day as those showers start to move through. And then for the south, temperatures rising once again kind of into the mid to upper teens. Might see some clearing again in the western sections, and then through the afternoon, that's when things clear out a little bit more into Winnipeg and the rest of southern Manitoba. And you might want to take the dog for a car ride instead of a walk tomorrow as we see some showers and thunderstorms possible in the Winnipeg area, but should get some clearing skies. Thanks to Gwen for sending in this wonderful shot of Hannah. I'll have a full look at your 7-day forecast, Riley, coming up.
Probably one of those times, Ethan, where rain is probably a good thing, especially for the north. Thanks. A Saskatchewan farmer recently made a discovery that's out of this world. As CBC's Jason Warwick reports, it is raising questions and concerns about the problem of space debris.
Not a space junkie or anything like that. This is just what we found in our field, so.
As a farmer in rural Saskatchewan, Barry Sawchuk is used to removing rocks and weeds from his fields, but he recently discovered this 2-meter wide, 40-kilogram heap of twisted, burnt metal.
My oldest son and I were out driving around just checking fields, see where we could start seeding, and we came across the largest object laying out in the field. Originally we just thought it was garbage.
But the 16 layers of metal and webbing made him suspect.
We know this is the inside because on the outside it's got it's sort of, whether this is insulation, I have no idea. Don't build spaceships for a living. I farm.
An astronomy professor traced it to a re-entry of a rocket from private company SpaceX back in February. While rare, she notes more large chunks of metal from space have been found recently in Australia and Washington state. This space debris smashed through the roof of a Florida home. NASA determined it came from the International Space Station.
It's really just luck that it did not hit, right? Like if that had hit in the middle of Regina or New York City, like you said, it very easily could have killed someone.
Samantha Lawler says launches and re-entries of spacecraft are now a daily occurrence, so that risk is increasing rapidly and better regulations are urgently needed. Sawchuk reached out to SpaceX, but no one answered his call.
I think if I can, I'm going to sell it.
Sawchuk says he plans to donate some of the money to rebuild his local hockey rink. Jason Warwick, CBC News, Saskatoon.
12 Manitobans who have demonstrated excellence and achievement in their field are receiving the province's highest honor. Among them, a Winnipeg firefighter whose story we'll delve into when we return. There are 12 people who have been appointed to the Order of Manitoba. You're looking at some of the faces of those 12 new people who have been chosen for our province's highest honor. Among them, the province's top doctor, Dr. Brent Roussin, you see him there, a former MLA, community supporters, professional firefighter and community fundraiser Chad Swayze is also among them. He was instrumental in Winnipeg successfully hosting the 2023 World Police and Fire Games. He stopped by Information Radio this morning.
It's pretty special. I didn't go into what I did thinking that this would be a nomination and an actual receiving this award, but it's a special recognition of all the hard work done.
What did you go into firefighting for back in the day? What made you want to be a firefighter?
Years before, a family member had seizures, and I didn't know what to do. So I wanted to do the best I could, taking a first aid course, and then it just kind of progressed into to becoming a paramedic and firefighter in Brandon, and then moving on to Winnipeg.
Who was having seizures?
My sister.
Yeah. How old was she?
She was probably about 16, 17, and I was quite young. I was 12 or so, and not knowing then what or how to help with that, that's why I took my first aid course.
What does it feel like to be able to save someone, to help someone?
It's pretty special. You can't help everyone, and especially in seizures, you're more just helping them to recover from what's going on in their body.
But even in your life, in a wider way, you've given your life to the service of helping others.
It's good to meet up with people that you've actually helped along the way. We did CPR on a firefighter, and for over an hour, and luckily he recovered and he's back at work. And I was actually able to sit at a Bomber game with him and watch the Bomber game with him. So that was a special moment.
How incredible. How incredible. The thing is, of course, the other side of this is that this is very challenging on firefighters' mental health. We just this month have been doing stories about, trying to get better mental health awareness and supports. I know that you yourself have struggled with that in the past. Can you tell us a bit about that, what you struggled with?
I was involved in a workplace accident where we were blown out of a building back in 2012, and I struggled with the what ifs. What if we were a little bit further into the building or whatnot. So my mental capabilities really took a deep dive there, and I struggled with going back to work for a while, just because not knowing maybe the next day would be my last.
Were you formally then diagnosed with PTSD and treated for that then, Chad?
Yes, I went through a couple of psychologists and eventually diagnosed with PTSD. That was back when we really didn't have legislation for presumptive legislation for mental illness. When a firefighter has a broken bone, they can see, it's broken, you're not going to work. But when you have a broken mind, it's hard to diagnose that and to get recognition for that. So I helped the fire union go in front of the MLAs and talk about the importance of being covered under the presumptive legislation.
I know you did that. What was it like for you to do that? Anyone who steps forward as a first in this province to fight for others, it can be nerve-wracking. You're out there with your personal story as well. So tell me a bit about what that was like in when you sort of looked at yourself in the mirror and said, no, I'm going to do this. This is important.
That was probably one of the hardest times in my life because I was struggling and going through my treatment for PTSD, but also having to talk to people that I didn't really know, MLAs and whatnot, about my very personal story. And back then, there's a lot more stigma against, you don't talk about your feelings in the fire hall. Now it's more open. People are more adapted to talking to other firefighters, talking to friends and family about what's going on with them mentally because of stuff that's going on in the fires and medical calls.
Still ahead, a bit of an unsettled 7-day forecast ahead. It's raining once again here in downtown Winnipeg. Ethan's back with a last check on our forecast next.
Well, some possible showers and thunderstorms tomorrow afternoon in Winnipeg as we reach a daytime high of 17. Warming up into Friday, Saturday, Friday especially, but we still do have a chance of some showers for both days. Temperatures near normal for the latter part of the long weekend, and then some more substantial clearing, albeit temperatures dropping a bit as we head into the first part of the work week next week. But a couple of breezy days in there too, Riley. So spring bringing us some rain and some wind, kind of as expected.
Oh, well, thanks, Ethan. Some birds in Quebec are the talk of the town, even though they haven't even hatched yet. Here's your Daily Lift. 4 rare peregrine falcon eggs from Trois-Rivières have been transported to a bridge in Montreal. The move was undertaken when it became clear a nesting pair would try to raise their chicks in a potentially dangerous construction zone. The eggs were transported to the steelworks of a bridge in Montreal instead in order to give them a better chance of surviving, and miraculously, a new set of parents adopted the relocated eggs and are caring for them. Peregrine falcons are considered to be the fastest birds on the planet and are considered a vulnerable species by the Quebec government as well. Kind of reminds me of the time that we raised some goslings that were abandoned when we were kids. They were very cute until they flew away, and then we were heartbroken. So we'll leave it with that. Have a great night, everyone.